The crash. The only thing worse than crashing on an uncharted world was crashing on an uncharted world while being hunted. Elias Carter groaned as he staggered out of the wreckage of the UN Sparrow. The dropship had been a stealth insertion vessel, designed to slip behind enemy lines. But now it was just burning debris scattered across the alien jungle. He wiped blood from his forehead. He was alive. The same couldn't be said for his crew. A glance back at the crumpled hull confirmed it. No movement. They were gone. I shouldn't be alive either. The Sparrow had been hit by something, not an explosion, not a missile, but an anomaly. 1 second they were running silent through enemy territory, their experimental stealth system engaged. The next, systems failure. Total blackout. The ship had fallen from orbit like a meteor, slamming into the surface of this unknown world. And now, he wasn't alone, because whatever brought him down was already looking for him. The hunters. Elias crouched low in the underbrush, ears straining for movement. The jungle was dense, humid, and strangely silent. No insects, no birds, just the distant, rhythmic clicking of something not human. They're here. He gritted his teeth. The Tavorians, galactic apex predators, infamous for their efficiency in war, had been tracking his ship. Now they were tracking him. And the worst part? He had no weapon. His standard-issue pulse rifle had been lost in the crash, buried beneath tons of wreckage. His only gear was a combat knife, a data slate, and the clothes on his back. Fantastic. Then he saw them. A group of Tavorian stalkers, tall, skeletal figures with obsidian-black armor and elongated limbs, moving in absolute silence through the jungle. Their helmets glowed faintly, scanning the terrain with thermal optics. Elias held his breath. The Tavorians weren't just soldiers. They were hunters. And humans? To them, humans were prey. You picked the wrong guy to hunt. Nowhere to run. Elias had one advantage: he knew how to disappear. He had been trained for Black Ops survival. He had infiltrated dozens of hostile worlds. And he wasn't dying today. Moving painfully slow, he pressed his body against the jungle floor, blending into the shadows. If I move, they'll hear me. If I breathe too loud, they'll find me. He needed to think. The Sparrow's wreckage was a beacon, a dead giveaway that something had crashed here. But that also meant one thing: the Tavorians wouldn't assume he had moved far yet. Which meant, I have a head start. A small one. But it was enough. Then, crack. A branch snapped somewhere behind him. The clicking sound stopped. Then came a low, guttural snarl. Elias's blood turned to ice. They found my trail. And just like that, the hunt began. The chase begins. Elias didn't have time to think. The moment that branch snapped, he knew he had seconds, at most. Move. No. He pushed off the jungle floor, silent and swift, sprinting through the thick undergrowth. His bare hands scraped against rough bark as he slid between trees, using every bit of natural cover he could. Behind him, the Tavorians moved fast. They weren't running. They didn't need to. They were stalking. Calculating. Elias could hear the soft whir of their adaptive camouflage engaging, their forms blurring into the jungle shadows. They were getting closer. And he was still unarmed. Think, Carter, think. His mind raced. The Tavorians were an elite hunting species, the best killers the galaxy had ever seen. They didn't just track their prey. They played with it. But humans? Humans were a problem. Because unlike every other species in the known galaxy, we fight back. Ambush or die. Elias skidded to a stop, dropping low behind a massive, gnarled tree trunk. His lungs burned. His muscles screamed for rest. But he wasn't stopping. Not yet. His hands darted into the damp soil, fingers closing around a sharp piece of wreckage, a jagged metal shard broken from the Sparrow. It's not a rifle, but it'll do. His ears caught the clicking again. 2 of them. Close. Too close. Elias took a breath. Steady. Silent. Then, he moved. Like a coiled spring, he lunged from the shadows, his makeshift blade aimed for the closest Tavorian's throat. The alien reacted instantly. It twisted, moving with inhuman speed, its gauntlet hand lashing out, but Elias had already adjusted. He ducked beneath the strike, drove the metal shard upward. Crunch. The jagged steel punched through the Tavorian's helmet, slipping between its segmented armor. The creature staggered back, choking. Its partner spun, leveling a plasma rifle. Elias ripped the weapon from the dying alien's grip. One smooth motion. He turned, fired point blank. A burst of blue energy punched through the second Tavorian's skull. 2 bodies hit the ground. That's more like it. Elias wasted no time. He pried a combat blade from the first corpse, grabbed the plasma rifle spare charge pack and moved. The other Tavorians would have heard that. And they wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The kill zone. Elias knew the jungle wouldn't hide him forever. If he wanted to survive, he needed to turn the tables. I have a rifle now. They're not expecting a counterattack. Use it. He ran toward the densest part of the jungle, his boots crushing damp foliage. He needed higher ground, a vantage point. And then, he'd make them regret coming after him. He spotted it, a massive ancient tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled like it had been growing for centuries. The perfect perch. Elias climbed, fast and quiet, hoisting himself into the thick canopy. He positioned himself between two massive branches, rifle raised, finger on the trigger. Then he waited. He didn't have to wait long. The Tavorians arrived, moving with military precision. 4 of them. They advanced through the jungle like ghosts, their movements coordinated, sweeping the area with razor-sharp discipline. They had no idea he was watching them. Elias slowed his breathing, lined up his shot. Time to remind them why humans aren't prey. He squeezed the trigger. First blood. Elias squeezed the trigger. The plasma rifle bucked against his shoulder, sending a bolt of blue-white energy screaming through the jungle. Direct hit. The lead Tavorian barely had time to react. The plasma round punched through its shoulder, melting armor and flesh alike. It staggered, letting out a guttural hiss of pain, but it wasn't dead. Damn tough bastards. The other 3 Tavorians scattered instantly, their movements inhumanly fast, diving into the shadows. Their adaptive cloaking shimmered, their forms beginning to blur. Too late. Elias had anticipated that. He wasn't fighting a war. He wasn't fighting soldiers. He was fighting predators. And predators? They expected their prey to run. They didn't expect their prey to hunt them back. Elias didn't stay still. Keep moving. Stay unpredictable. He jumped from his perch before their return fire could track him, hitting the jungle floor in a controlled roll. The moment he landed, he fired again, targeting the one he had already wounded. Another shot. Another direct hit. This time the Tavorian went down for good. 3 left. Silent death. The jungle erupted in plasma fire. Bright streaks of energy lit up the trees as the remaining Tavorians fired blindly, trying to pin Elias down. He ducked low, rolling behind a fallen tree, pressing his body into the damp earth. They still think they're in control. Elias counted to 3 in his head. Then, he moved. Fast. He darted between trees, using the thick foliage to his advantage. The Tavorians were relying on their motion trackers. But human movement? It was erratic. Unpredictable. And then, a golden opportunity. One of the remaining Tavorians had taken position behind a rock, plasma rifle scanning for movement. But its mistake? It had tunnel vision. Elias moved in absolute silence, sliding through the undergrowth until he was right behind it. The alien barely had time to turn before Elias drove his combat knife into the soft tissue beneath its jaw. A quick, brutal twist. No sound. No wasted motion. Just another body hitting the jungle floor. 2 left. The turning point. The remaining Tavorians knew something was wrong now. They had stopped firing. They were adapting. Good. So am I. Elias looped around, staying low, using every ounce of his training to become a ghost in the jungle. The last 2 moved together now, watching each other's backs. They knew splitting up had been a mistake. But that didn't matter anymore. Because Elias had a new plan. The wreckage of the Sparrow wasn't far. And it had something he needed. He moved carefully, avoiding dry branches, avoiding the faint glow of their helmet scanners. He had minutes at most before they realized he was repositioning. But when he reached the crash site, jackpot. A single, undamaged detonation charge. That's all I need. The trap. Elias worked fast. He rigged the det charge near the wreckage, setting up a tripwire system using a thin strand of fiber optic cabling, practically invisible in the low light. Then he did something risky. He stepped into the open and fired a shot. The Tavorians immediately responded, their plasma fire shredding the trees around him. Good. Come on. Chase me. Elias bolted, moving just fast enough to keep them on his trail. He led them straight toward the wreckage. The moment they crossed the invisible tripwire, boom. The jungle exploded in fire and metal. One Tavorian was instantly vaporized. The last one? Thrown across the clearing, armor cracked, struggling to stand. Elias approached, plasma rifle raised. The alien looked up, gasping, wounded, but defiant. You think this changes anything? It rasped. Elias tilted his head. You tell me. Then he pulled the trigger. They sent more. The jungle was eerily silent. The bodies of the Tavorians smoldered in the aftermath of Elias's ambush. The acrid scent of burning biomass filled the air. 4 down. But they weren't the real threat. Elias knelt beside one of the corpses, yanking the combat knife free from where he had left it lodged beneath the alien's jaw. He wiped the bloodied blade on his tattered uniform and exhaled slowly. That was just the first wave. The real hunters were coming next. A sound. A distant humming. Oh, vibrating. Getting closer. Elias turned his gaze skyward. From the murky green clouds above, something descended. Tavorian dropships. Sleek, black, and twice the size of the original strike vessel. He counted 3 of them. They weren't sending scouts anymore. They were sending an entire platoon. No more running. Options? Elias had no extraction team coming. No backup. No reinforcements. But I don't need them. The wreckage of the Sparrow had provided him more than just explosives. He reached into the debris and found it, a partially intact comms array. The moment he activated it, a distorted voice crackled through the static. Lieutenant Elias Vale. You are ordered to surrender. There is nowhere left to run. Elias smirked. He pressed the transmit button. I wasn't planning to run. Then he cut the line. He had one last trick up his sleeve. The final gambit. He set up everything within minutes. He placed every remaining charge at key points around the jungle. The wreckage. The cliffside. The clearing. And then he waited. The Tavorians landed in force. Dozens of them. Fully armored. Weapons drawn. Thermal visors sweeping through the smoky jungle haze. Elias crouched in the dense underbrush, watching as the hunting party advanced. Come on. Just a little further. Then he pressed the detonator. The world erupted. A chain reaction of explosions tore through the jungle. Trees shattered. The cliffside collapsed in a thunderous roar, crushing half the platoon under a rain of stone and metal. The surviving Tavorians scrambled, confused, disoriented. Elias moved like a shadow through the fire and chaos. One by one they fell. By the time the flames settled, Elias stood alone. The message. The last surviving Tavorian lay at his feet, wounded, gasping. It stared up at him with uncomprehending horror. You were supposed to be prey, it hissed. Elias tilted his head. No, he said, voice low, dangerous. Then he leaned in, whispering. I was the real hunter. With one final shot, the war was over. The aftermath. Days later, the Tavorian High Command received a single transmission. A human voice. Come. Steady. It said. Never hunt us again. And they never did. Fire humans never backed down. If you loved this story, make sure to subscribe to the Void Narratives for more epic sci-fi battles. Rocket fire.